The Escondida mine sits 3,000 meters up in the mountains of northern Chile. At that height, thin air makes engines work harder, and it makes something else work harder too. A part most people never think about: the transmission inside a giant mining truck. An operator brings his Caterpillar 797 down the haul road, a truck the size of a small house, and he feels the gears hesitate for just a second. That hesitation is the machine trying to tell him something before any warning light does. He radios it in. The answer he gets back is not the one he wants. The rebuild part he needs is not sitting in a warehouse nearby. It is still on a boat somewhere, 3 days away, maybe 5. And every single day that truck sits still costs the mine around $80,000 in lost hauling. He shuts the engine down and just looks out at the other trucks still moving on the haul road, some of them wearing a badge that was not on this mine 10 years ago. Here's what he does not know sitting there. The company that built those newer trucks never had a part like the one he is waiting on in the first place. So why would one truck maker build in a weakness the other one simply avoided? And what decision made years earlier inside Caterpillar itself made that weakness permanent instead of something they could just fix? To answer that, you have to go back to the late 1990s, when Caterpillar basically owned this entire category of machine. Nobody else came close. The 797 was designed at Caterpillar's mining division in Decatur, Illinois, and it went into service in 1999 at the Bingham Canyon copper mine in Utah. But the truck itself was only half the story. Behind it sat an entire support system, a network of dealers who could get you a replacement part fast, mechanics trained specifically on that machine, and rebuild programs that had been refined for decades. That system reached copper mines in Arizona, coal mines in Wyoming, iron ore mines in Australia. It is one thing to build a good truck. It is another thing to build the whole system around it so that owning anything else feels risky. That was Caterpillar's real advantage. Not just the machine, but everything wrapped around it. But here is the question worth sitting with. What happens when a competitor solves a problem your entire system was never built to solve? In 2003, that problem showed up. A family business in a small town in southern Germany had spent 50 years building cranes and diggers, not trucks. It was founded in 1949 by a man named Hans Liebherr, and decades later, it was still entirely owned by his family. When Liebherr's engineers finally built a mining truck, they made one decision that changed everything. Instead of a heavy mechanical gearbox, the kind that grinds through years of wear and eventually needs replacing, they wired the engine straight to electric motors built into the wheels themselves. Think of it a bit like a hybrid car, except built for a machine that weighs as much as a jumbo jet. No gearbox to wear out, no transmission stage to fail at high altitude, and because there was no heavy gearbox, the whole truck weighed less, which meant more of every trip was actual cargo instead of dead steel. Mines running trucks at high altitude had been treating transmission rebuilds as just a normal cost of doing business for years. So when a mining company needed a truck that would not lose weeks of production to a broken gearbox, Caterpillar had nothing on its list that could answer that need. Liebherr did. If you have ever waited days for a part that should have been sitting on a shelf, or if you like to see more of this type of videos, hit subscribe, because we break down machine by machine, decision by decision, and there is a lot more coming. Now back to that first truck that switched over, because one sale on its own does not explain an entire industry shift. Something bigger happened next. In 2004, at a trade show in Munich, Liebherr showed off an upgraded version of that truck, one that could carry 400 short tons, more than any mechanical drive truck in the world at the time. Mine planners walked around it, touched the wheel motors, and asked the engineers standing there the same question over and over. How many major parts would need replacing over the truck's working life? The answer was fewer than they were used to budgeting for. Picture a fleet manager explaining the decision to his own team. And the logic probably sounded something like this. We are not just buying a truck. We are buying weeks of extra work out of it every single year. Within a few years, these trucks were showing up at coal and iron ore operations that had run Caterpillar equipment for a generation. But could one new supplier really shake an entire industry? What actually moved the market was not that first sale. It was everything that happened in the 4 years after it, while Caterpillar's own truck sat stuck at 360 short tons with no answer ready. So why did Caterpillar wait 4 years to respond to something this obvious? Was it because nobody there saw it coming? Not exactly. And this is the part people usually get wrong. Big companies do not fail to notice a problem. They notice it and then choose not to act on it, because acting on it would cost them something else they care about. Here is the actual mechanism. Selling a brand new truck is what is called lumpy revenue. A mine buys a fleet once and does not buy again for 15 or 20 years. So it shows up as one big spike and then nothing. But parts and rebuilds are the opposite. They are steady, they repeat every single year, and they carry a much higher profit margin than the truck itself ever did. Caterpillar's dealer network had spent decades building a hugely profitable business around rebuilding transmissions and gearboxes across thousands of trucks already out in the field. What people in the industry call the installed base. So the executive who kept building trucks the old mechanical way for another decade was not asleep at the wheel. He was protecting a rebuild and parts business that only existed because of that old mechanical design. Switching to the German approach would have made a chunk of that profitable business disappear overnight. Those two goals, winning new orders and protecting the old parts business, were pulling in opposite directions. And when that happens inside a company, which one do you think usually wins? Liebherr's truck held its lead for 4 years. So mine planners doing the math on lifetime costs, not just sticker price, had a real number to point to. And that number followed Caterpillar into every new deal at high altitude and steep grade sites around the world. But a lead like that does not break a decades-old dealer relationship overnight. And most mines did not rip out their entire fleet. So the shift showed up first at the edges, in the next batch of trucks ordered for expansion, rather than a full replacement of what mines already owned. But those edge orders kept adding up, one after another, each one giving Liebherr's plant in Newport News, Virginia, another real customer to point to the next time a mine was choosing between bids. So by the time Caterpillar finally answered with the 797F in September of 2008, matching that 400 short-ton payload with a bigger mechanical engine, something had already shifted. For a growing number of mine planners, fuel use and maintenance cost, not just the price tag on day one, had become the number that decided the bid. But Caterpillar's answer was still a mechanical gearbox underneath, just a bigger one. The same design dressed up. So was this really about German engineers being smarter than American ones? Not really, and that is worth being honest about. The real reason is simpler and a little more human. Caterpillar's rebuild and parts business gave its own leaders a genuinely sensible reason, quarter after quarter, to put off the one big change that would have closed the gap for good. Liebherr never had a mechanical parts empire like that to lose, because it had never built trucks the old way to begin with. That is the real asymmetry here. A challenger with nothing to lose by changing the rules will almost always move faster than a giant whose most profitable division depends on the old rules staying exactly as they are. Isn't that true in almost every industry that gets disrupted, not just mining trucks? So where does that leave things today? All those mechanical drive trucks Caterpillar sold through the 2000s are still out there working, still generating the rebuild business that made switching so hard to justify in the first place. But the next generation of orders, from expansion projects at Escondida to new coal and iron ore sites choosing between designs right now, is no longer an automatic win for the American company. Caterpillar did not lose the mining truck. It lost the argument that building it the old mechanical way was the only serious option. And that leaves one big question hanging. What happens when the same family-owned German company turns out to be the biggest crane maker in the world too, and a completely different American giant makes the exact same mistake on a different continent 20 years later? That is the next story. If you want to see how it ends, you already know what to do. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.